It's early morning here at sunrising. On what looks like it could be a beautiful day in late July. On the right-hand side of the path is what we call Marjorie's meadow. And at the start of Marjorie's are all these wonderful meadow cranesbill. At this time of day, still covered in dew. At this time of day, early, the meadow always looks subdued, waiting for the warmth of the sun, and the flowers will really open up, and the butterflies will get going. But in the dew, with the early morning birds, there's something gentle about it. One of the plants that's very evident at this time of year in the established meadow are the knapweeds, the common knapweed or black knapweed, and the bigger, lacier, greater knapweed. The other richly coloured flower you see a lot of now is lady's bedstraw. This yellow, fluffy plant. Called bedstraw because it was used in the bedstraw of our ancestors. And behind it you can see bird's foot trefoil, little yellow, pea-like flower. And the red and white clover. And here's another bedstraw in the meadow, the white hedge bedstraw. You can also see the long seed pods of yellow rattle. Yellow rattle, an important part of any meadow, semi-parasitic on the grasses. Helping keep the thick grasses down. You can see a common blue, basking in the sun on a strand of Yorkshire fog. From the roundhouse, I'm now looking back towards the main entrance. Over the meadow, Betty's meadow. And here in the leaves of the oak, one of our parkland oaks, that we hope will grow up to be a beautiful English oak in the woodland. You can see a couple of ladybirds, a few wasps. The oak has a second flush of growth around July, called Lammas growth, from the old harvest festival, Loafmas, Lammas, at the beginning of August. You can see new growth at the ends. This new flush of growth is important because so many creatures, little invertebrates, eat the leaves of the oak. It's home to so many people. You can see the first acorns just starting to swell. Up at the roundhouse, looking over Betty's meadow towards the woodland, you can see that small skipper butterfly just basking on a strand of timothy, lovely thick grass. And here we are at the roundhouse. The morning sun flooding through from the east on that lovely Hornton stone floor. Looking out over what we call Michael's Meadow from the top by the roundhouse, by one of the parkland oaks. You can see some big teasels, not quite in flower. Grassland. And here one of my favourite mixes of flowers. You can see the bluish purple of meadow cranesbill amongst the knapweed. I'm rather fond of this creature too. Although some may think it a weed, it looks a bit weed-like. By weed, I suppose I mean a ruderal plant, thistle and something like that. This is a bristly ox tongue. And here in the grasses, field scabious. It's still early in the day. Later on, these will be covered with butterflies and other little pollinators. You might still be able to see a touch of dew. I don't know if you can see a ringlet there in the grasses, basking, warming as the day begins. And here a lovely patch of wild carrot. This is what we call the mown square, an area where people can pause or have services or reflect. And mown grass is important. We don't have sheep or other grazing animals, but it allows for little plants to come through. Some self-heal there. So can you see the spider's web glinting with dew? Here you can see a marbled white pausing on a field scabious. Lost part of its wing towards the end of its life, but still very beautiful. And we head into woodland. This is Seth's wood, with trees that are 7 to 10 years old. Silver birch, a little hawthorn still in its card, bird cherry, and in front of us a rather lovely wild service tree with the silver birch behind. The wild service, Sorbus terminalis, is an interesting tree. They often have establishment issues. They're quite tender, but when they get going they're really beautiful. There's a lovely wild cherry. Some teasel under a silver birch. And a guelder rose with the red berries just coming into their ripeness. It's important in woodland to have areas which are thick and then areas which are sparser to bring light in. And although we create this, nature will continue to make that so as trees are competed out or fall. And a little bit of light in the woodland allows for plants to get going underneath. Here we have a few pyramidal orchids, which we mark with little blue sticks, so that we know where they've come up and if they come up the following year. Some field bindweed, still closed, waiting for the sun to reach it. And you can also see and hear a little bit of bird's foot trefoil. A lovely big ant's nest. They're very important parts of an ecosystem. Little meadow ants busying themselves, often on the edges or in sunlit areas in the woodland. Amongst younger trees now. And underneath, on a lower branch of this sweetbriar rose, you can see a gall, robin's pincushion. And the rose hips starting to swell and blush. I'm down on the southern boundary of the site now, a little later in the day, just drawn over into the ruderal margin on the edge of the site, where there are brambles, thistles, lots of long false oak grass, and docks, nettles, all sorts of things that are poking and stinging and prickling me. But drawn to the bramble because of its life, filled with bees, butterflies, and if I were to step away for a while, the birds coming back in as well. Lovely to see the flowers, beautiful little pink flowers, related of course to the roses. We keep this area wild, cutting it back every few years just so it doesn't invade. Lovely tall Timothy in front of me. and the bright flowers of the great willow herb. In lovely contrast to the red of the dock, and the pale, pale pink lilac of the creeping thistle. And on the other side of the track, we're in Peterswood. Young trees 2 or 3 years old, field maple, silver birch, hawthorn, bird cherry, guelder rose, the sun coming through, more birches. Little hazels, and the roundhouse in the distance, looking out over Betty's meadow. Here's where we planted trees a few years ago that are doing beautifully, just on the southern boundary. Dogwoods, the lovely red tinge, deep red burgundy tinge to their leaves. Little berries, still green. Getting lovely and thick in here. And the red berries of the guelder rose. More berries. These are alder buckthorn. An exquisite little tree, delicate in its leaves and the way that it grows, beautiful berries. Looks a little tatty at first, but once it gets going, as you can see, just lovely, and crucial for the brimstone butterflies. There's that southern boundary plantation, and over the track into the new area of Michael's meadow, which a couple of weeks ago, a month ago perhaps, was filled completely with oxeye daisies, and now all the brown you see in front of me are seed heads of the daisies. You can in here see lady's bedstraw, that fluffy yellow plant. by my feet. Bird's foot trefoil, also called eggs and bacon. And there looks like an autumn hawk bit. All sorts of things in here. You see the yellow agrimony. Beautiful, delicate strands. And yarrow, the white of the yarrow. One of the lovely things about yarrow is how many shades the flowers come in, from bright white through to a really rich dusky pink. And behind you can see some tufted vetch. There's a head of Yorkshire fog, a beautiful grass, just lying on top of that white yarrow. Another little autumn hawk bit, the yellow down there. And the purple of tufted vetch. Lots of soldier beetles around at the moment. And you may be hearing the little drumming of crickets. Some field scabious here. You can see a meadow brown on one, yarrow behind. There are so many beautiful different grasses. This is one of my favourite. This is a common bent. Very, very fine. From the pond, if we come over towards the boundary, the western boundary, see a little nest box with some tansy, yellow tansy by it, and the soft lilac of the creeping thistle. Come round to the hedge. Into what we call the tussock margin. Again, creeping thistle, it's allowed to be here, but other things as well. So the yellow agrimony, the docks, and these strands, long, beautiful strands of grass. Can't remember what they're called. Maybe it will come to me. Some daisies and meadow cranesbill in there. And this bright, fluffy leaves is again tansy. Lovely big stand of teasels. The broad round heads of wild carrot, always covered in insects, little flies. The yellow agrimony, and the big lacy flowers of the greater knapweed. Tufted hair grass, that's what it's called, these long grasses. From here you can see the horizon, the edge hills, and what we call the bare patch in the middle. Over the grassland. You can see there some red campion, greater knapweed, oxeye daisies, sorrel, and of course round here the agrimony. And just as the sun goes in, the brilliant yellow of tansy. Right up at the northwest corner, what we call the reflect corner, because that's what it says on the bench. In time, this area will be a mixture of woodland and meadow. At the moment, it's still just grassland, cut every 3, 4, or 5 years. Up here along the northern boundary, there's a gradual creep of blackthorn. It's very good for wildlife, for butterflies, this young blackthorn. But we cut it in succession. A little bit one year, a little bit another year. Otherwise, if we didn't, it would keep creeping all the way across the grassland. This view's looking west, over to Wilmington Hill, Meon Hill, from Tierstone. We're over in Liliana's wood now, quite near the front gate. Looking at one of the crab apples. Crab apples have such a very large gene pool. Some of them are really very close to eating apples. Some of them are very sour indeed. Lovely to see this crop of apples. And to feel the shade, the shush of a little area where the trees are really getting going. These trees now 12, 13, 14 years old. And of course not much on the woodland floor here. It will develop over time, bringing in all kinds of woodland species. But at the moment we're in a transition stage between wood and meadow, or meadow and wood. And out into the sunshine of the younger woodland. But first a few more apples. And in the heart of the new area of trees in Liliana's wood. Some newer graves. Some with some lovely plantings. Field scabious, red campion, and some meadow sweet on here. And on this spot here, we have some clustered bellflower. Bit of cow parsley still. You can see the viburnum, the Guelder rose behind, has been eaten quite a lot, but it's a young thing and it will recover. You can see all the little field bindweed, and here we have some beautiful wild basil. And some purpler, more purple, self-heal. And buttercups still in flower. This is an interesting mix. Bristly ox tongue and musk mallow. bristly ox tongue not quite in flower, and the musk mallow just going over. A lovely strong hazel tree in front of us, and at its feet again lots of lovely wild basil. This might not survive once the woodland really gets going, but it will shed seed, move into sunnier spots, as and when it needs to. Again in Liliana's wood, by a crabapple, we have some St. John's wort, probably perforate St. John's wort, some greater knapweed, and a yarrow. Foxgloves very seldom work on this soil, but here we've got one that seems to be doing okay. Quite small, next to the lacy flowers of a liverwort plantain. And back at the meadow,